That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Windy City Gridiron and SB Nation. Bill Zimmerman with you, and I am joined by Jacob Infante, the Windy City Gridiron senior draft analyst. I'm sure you all follow him on Twitter already. Great insight throughout the draft season, and he joins us now to talk about the Bears selection at 10. After a one-spot trade down from 9 to 10, pick up a 2024 fourth from the Eagles, pass on Jalen Carter, and take Tennessee right tackle Darnell Wright. We're going to break it down with Jacob right now. Jacob, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Definitely didn't see this exact situation coming. I knew the Bears could be in the market for Darnell Wright. I didn't expect them to trade down one pick and end up with him. And the way that the draft's fallen so far, I didn't necessarily expect either. But I'm happy with the pick. I think that, you needed an offensive tackle, Wright, really just fits everything that the Bears are trying to establish, not just in their offensive line, but in the culture in general.
All right, well, let's kind of talk about how this developed and kind of what went down within the top 10. A lot of movement. The Texans going crazy, coming up to 2 and 3 and taking a quarterback and getting Will Anderson. And then you kind of thought Jalen Carter might go to Seattle. They just decide to go another route. Arizona moves up, takes Paris Johnson. So that's the first offensive lineman off the board. I'd be very curious if Paris Johnson was there at 9 had the Bears done something a little differently. But then, of course, let's talk about this angle first. So that Jalen Carter falls to 9 and he's there. Ryan Poles clearly uncomfortable about something. So for you personally, if you had an opportunity to make this pick, would you have gone Jalen Carter over Darnell Wright, or was the offensive line need too much?
So me personally, I probably would have gone Carter over Wright. That said, I'm not in there in the war room. I'm not talking with Jalen Carter. I don't know him as a person. So clearly there's, like you mentioned, they didn't feel comfortable enough to take him. Otherwise, I mean, they would have. So with that in mind, I think that, moving back one spot, getting a future 4th round pick, I mean, that's all good in my eyes. Again, I think Carter was the second best overall player in this class, even when I factor in the off the field stuff into my grade for him. But with that in mind, is that with your first round pick that you ever have as general manager of an NFL team, is that what you want to tie your legacy to? I'm not necessarily sure. I think this is a perfect landing spot for Carter in Philadelphia, personally, coming into such a dominant established culture. I think that's going to be fantastic for him. And that was a very good move by the Eagles. But if the Bears, they clearly don't feel comfortable enough to take him. Otherwise, I feel strongly they would have. Otherwise, that's how the Bears ended up here. And I'm okay with that. Just simply because I don't know all the details. It's tough for me to determine super accurately exactly, is this a good move? Is this a bad move? I don't know, because I don't know who Jalen Carter is. I don't know him as a person. I don't know him as a teammate, whatever. But I do know that Darnell Wright's a very good player. So with all that said, I think that's, it worked out well for Chicago, and I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to play it off and see what happens.
Yeah, and this is why Howie Roseman has become such a great general manager. And look, you're right. Jalen Carter has issues. Jalen Carter may not pan out for Philadelphia, but this is a Philadelphia Eagles team that won the NFC. They're the second best team in the NFL. And because of a trade they made last year and then being able to make a little bit of a maneuver here, they come out and get arguably the best talent in the draft. And that is why the Eagles are going to continue to be a force in the NFC. But let's talk offensive line really quick. For you in your offensive line rankings, I know you're a big fan of Darnell Wright, and we'll get into what Wright brings to the table. But offensive line rankings, where did you have him amongst the tackles in terms of the potential selection there?
So I had Darnell Wright as tackle 3 in this class. And so I had Paris Johnson as my tackle 1. And obviously he was the first tackle off the board. I had Broderick Jones out of Georgia slightly ahead of Darnell Wright. So just because I think there's more athletic upside there. So he was slightly higher in my rankings, but it's not enough of a difference that I'm irate that they went with Wright over Jones. It's apples and oranges. It's just a matter of what kind of offensive tackle you like more. And I mean, Wright, having played more right tackle, having that experience, I think that, probably played a role into it because he's probably going to slide into right tackle. So, I had Wright as tackle 3, and then Skoronski I had at guard. So, he doesn't factor into those positional rankings there. But I'm definitely a fan of Wright. Like you said, I think that, he's going to step in right away and start. And I think he has a capability to do it at a very high level.
All right, so before we get to Wright, you mentioned Peter Skoronski, and we know a lot of Chicago Bears fans and Chicago Bears media have been pounding the table for Peter Skoronski. We know the length issue, the arm length just isn't there. We know that would make him, the outlier at tackle if he was a successful tackle. You mentioned you had him at guard. You felt he needed to bump inside. Do you think ultimately that was the issue that bumped Skoronski below Wright or maybe off the board completely was the length issue?
I do, yes. And I think that you're looking at Skoronski. He's a guy with really good tape. I think he's technically sound. He's a good strength, good athlete, intelligent player. He's got the NFL lineage, if that's something you're looking for in your NFL players. But yeah, I think it comes down to length. And realistically, I'm going to speculate. I don't want to point fingers, but I do find it kind of interesting that a lot of the media types pounding the table for Skoronski to be a Chicago Bear have some sort of ties to the Northwestern program or university. I'm not going to say that's 100% the case. I just think there's a trend there. But anyway, Skoronski is an incredible talent. He's a hell of a football player. I think he's going to be a very good starter at the NFL level. I just think that's going to be at guard. And at that point, guard isn't as valuable of a position in today's NFL as tackle. So it ultimately comes down to that. And the lack of arm length, he doesn't have the measurables to project as a safe bet at tackle, at least at the next level.
All right, let's jump into Darnell Wright. I think for me, when I watch tape, and obviously I don't watch at the level you do, the thing that jumps off the page to me is how good of a pass blocker he is. He neutralized a lot of talented edge players in the SEC, guys that we've seen already come off the board, and he did an outstanding job with that. Obviously, big physical specimen too, which you think should help in the run game. I felt his run blocking could use some work. Obviously, most rookies need some work. So, kind of, what was your overall view on Darnell Wright here?
Yeah, I think that with Darnell Wright, you're looking at a guy with just an insanely powerful anchor. Really, it comes down to that. Someone who just absorbs power incredibly well, packs a mean punch at the point of attack. I'd say he might be the strongest offensive tackle just from a play strength perspective that this class has to offer. So you're looking at that. You mentioned he's played really well against high-end competition. I mean, it's the SEC. Like you're not necessarily going against future accountants over here. These are NFL guys. So the power stands out and I think the size plays a big role in that. Like he got listed, I want to say it was 347 during his time in Tennessee. He cut down a little bit to 333, which I think that's a more sustainable weight. Maybe you could cut down a little more to like 320, 325. But the power stands out and he maximizes that really well with just a nasty demeanor, especially in the run game. You're going to see a guy who's willing to bury guys into the dirt. And that's something that Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus, they're trying to establish that kind of culture. Guys who are going to play to the whistle, going to block their asses off. And I think Darnell Wright's going to be one of those guys. And he's not an elite athlete at offensive tackle. Like I think Broderick Jones is more athletic in terms of blocking on the move, in terms of his acceleration to the second level. But Wright, for his size, is a very good athlete. Obviously, he tested very well. He's got nice burst coming into his pass sets. So I think he has the potential to be a very good player. Obviously, he's not a perfect prospect, I mean, I guess you could say, I do think that, hand placement can be a little bit of an inconsistency in his game sometimes. Redirectability is, it's decent. It's not elite, but all told, I think this is a guy who's going to start from day one. He's someone who's going to hold down that right tackle spot. And I'm very interested in seeing how he performs for Chicago.
Yeah, look, I think you're 100% right. I mean, I think he's plug and play. The fact that Braxton Jones, and that's the one thing. Let's talk about that really quick before we kind of get into Wright on this offensive line. You talk about Broderick Jones and even Paris Johnson and some of these other guys. These are guys that are projecting on the left side. So if you brought in one of those types, now you've got Braxton Jones. Which one are you moving to right tackle? You're creating kind of a potential for more of an issue there. In terms of, plug and play, so to speak. You're going to have, sometimes muscle memory is difficult for, especially at the tackle position, swinging over to the opposite side. So do you think in terms of, I know you said you had Broderick Jones a scotch higher, but the fact that Wright is a natural right tackle and the Bears had a right tackle need, do you think that helps and that kind of, closes the gap even more, or are you not concerned about that type of thing when you're talking about rookies and young players?
I do think that certainly helps. I don't think that's the end all be all when you're evaluating positions, but I do certainly think it helps that Darnell Wright is a natural right tackle. I mean, he has starting experience at both tackle spots, but again, right tackle is where he made his money, proverbially, hypothetically speaking. I don't even know if that's the right word for it, but whatever.
Yeah, we'll run with it.
Yeah, we'll go along with it. But I do think that helped out a lot. And, exactly like you said, muscle memory is huge for an offensive lineman. It's tougher. It's easier said than done to be able to switch from left tackle to right tackle, from left guard to right guard. There's a lot that goes into that. So I think that might have played a part. I think Broderick Jones could have been a fine right tackle. I think he could have, definitely done the job well. He would have been a good fit in this system. But I guess it is a safer pick taking Darnell Wright, a guy who, has better play strength and a guy who has that pure right tackle experience.
Now, we agree. Darnell Wright is kind of plug and play. When we get to OTAs here in a little bit, he is probably going to be with the ones. If not, he's with the twos. He's going to move into those ones pretty quickly. With kind of Larry Borum and the other tackle positions they have. Are you enough of a fan of Wright? Are you comfortable with the idea that they have their starting right tackle where they don't need to go out and get a veteran, whether, they keep Larry Borum as their swing tackle? Are you that comfortable with Wright week 1, September, whatever it's going to be, Wright starting at right tackle?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident with that. I think that he's shown the capabilities of being able to play at a very high level against elite talent. I mean, especially the Alabama game, we're looking at Will Anderson. He's, rushing the edge against Darnell Wright. Wright shut him down. Dallas Turner, who's a guy who's probably going to be a first-round pick in 2024, just, off my very early evaluations, he made little noise against Darnell Wright whenever he lined up against him. So I think he's someone who's going to start right away. Looking at that defensive line, I think it's definitely an issue. There's some solid defensive linemen, some veteran edge rushers still available. I think that's where you'd be better off allocating some of your post-draft money, at least in my opinion. So I'd be more than comfortable with keeping Wright at right tackle, and I guess have him compete with Larry Borum, and whatever. But I think that really it's going to be Wright who should start from day one. And I don't think there's necessarily a need to spend higher end money, or at least what's considered higher end money this late in the process on a free agent offensive tackle.
And a couple more on Wright, and then we'll wrap up the this mini Bears banter with Jacob Infante. Yeah. I was talking to EJ Snyder before the draft. He was on the podcast, and I was kind of talking about if Darnell Wright is the guy. The kind of the one thing that I really liked is, like you talked about, how he can neutralize edges, his pass blocking ability. And we always hear about the left tackle being, the blind tackle, the blind spot tackle, and the importance of that. And it's kind of changing with how everyone kind of QBs move around the pocket. And for me, Justin Fields, he's naturally going to be rolling out to the right side when they move him around. That's going to be his natural way to move when he does that. and having Wright over there and being able to, what he can do neutralizing players and kind of getting out in space and still being able to do that and give Fields time to kind of move the pocket, move to the right, roll out and find guys. I love that fit in this offensive line, that you're going to have a guy with this kind of pass blocking resume on the right side.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think in my time watching Tennessee's offense, which you've got such a talented group, obviously, I'm going to spend time in my pre-draft evaluations watching a good amount of Tennessee's offense. You see Hendon Hooker, who, on tape, he's an above average athlete at the quarterback position. There are instances, he tended to roll out or scramble or move to the right. And Darnell Wright proved to be more than capable of handling that, whether it's just simply burying guys into the dirt, whether it's adjusting his base, adjusting his footwork, or rolling his hips through contact. He's more than capable of helping out a scramble. I don't want to say a scrambling quarterback, because I don't think Hendon Hooker is necessarily that. I just think he's a quarterback who can scramble. And I think that's going to help Justin Fields a lot. I think that's going to help this Bears offense a lot. Just having a true stalwart at offensive tackle, a guy I think you're not going to beat him with power. I mean, if anything, you'll beat him with speed. But when you have Justin Fields at quarterback, you have someone who can outrun those edge rushers 99 times out of 100. So honestly, I'm not too worried about any potential issues with Wright. I know, like I mentioned, lateral quickness, not elite. It's solid. And I think that's really all you need when you have that much strength, when you're that powerful, when you have that sturdy of a base, and when you're refined in terms of your weight distribution like that. So I'm not worried about any potential scheme misfit with him. I think he's someone who's going to blend in and fit in right away.
All right. And last thing for you, we talked about, obviously, a very skilled pass blocker. I talked about how, think there's some things to iron out in the run game. Obviously, the Bears and Poles and Eberflus and Getsy are comfortable with him in their run scheme. How do you think Wright translates, and how do you think he fits in terms of how the Bears like to run the football?
Well, I'm just going to say, I think that, first of all, having Tevin Jenkins and Darnell Wright on the same offensive line, that's just nasty USA. Whatever happens with Tevin, regardless, I think, you have him at one of the guard spots. You have Darnell Wright at right tackle, and then Nate Davis, at the other guard spot. I think that's definitely a good foundation. And then Braxton Jones at left tackle showed some serious promise. But as for the offense itself, I do expect to see maybe a bit more wide zone than what we saw last year. But again, you're looking predominantly at generating movement at the point of attack. And that's what we saw a lot of with the Bears offensive line. That's why it did well in the run game. And I expect Darnell Wright to fit right in, because there's so many instances on tape where he's pushing guys and he's just driving them and pushing them back. And I think that's going to make him a really good fit in the run game for Chicago right away. And especially for a guy that big, if you accelerate well for that size, that's going to be so much momentum, and it's going to be very difficult to stop him in the run game. So I think pass protection, I think that's a must, and that's something you have to really, really value here. But I think it's also an added bonus in the run game that I think he's a good fit.
All right, Bears fans, Jacob Infante is going to be with me all day tomorrow as well. Bears have a bunch of picks in round 2. Who knows? They might, and round 3, they might pick up another one. You never know, with a little bit of a trade back or a little maneuvering. We know Ryan Poles clearly has no problem doing that. So we will be breaking down round 2 picks. Before I let you go, Jacob, since you were kind of putting together that offensive line, we got Davis and Jenkins at the guards, Jones and Wright at the tackles, and right now, presumptively, Cody Whitehair at center. Are you comfortable with those 5, or would you like to see an interior offensive lineman, a center, taken tomorrow or maybe early on Saturday?
I'm comfortable with that offensive line. I think for this year, I'd be fine with having Cody Whitehair at center. He's someone that, maybe his best days are behind him, but he's not so much of a liability that I think you need to move on from him right away. I mean, you don't go creating holes that don't necessarily need to be created. And with that said, if a John Michael Schmitz falls in round 2, or Joe Tippmann's there, or Luke Whippler out of Ohio State. He's someone maybe a little bit later than the other two, but if you can get one of those guys, then I think, yes, you could consider cutting Whitehair, saving that money, and trotting out a rookie at center, or, having him compete with Lucas Patrick, or, a long shot, but Doug Kramer. I'd be more than fine with that starting offensive line, though. That starting five, I think it's a solid offensive line.
It's competent.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, God knows how long since 2018, maybe, since the Bears have had that. So I think that would be huge. It's not elite by any means, but it's NFL starting caliber. And that's a pretty big step up from what they had last year.
All right. So there he is, Jacob Infante. Make sure you catch him tomorrow on my podcast, breaking down the second and third round picks. He's a fan of the pick, Darnell Wright at 10 for the Chicago Bears. Jacob, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right. That's going to wrap up Bears Banter, everyone. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bear down. Adios.